just wouldn't let me do it. And even though today is a day that they are to be honored, and that they have been, with us for 18 years and have done just a phenomenal job, and have been blessings to each and every one of us, they still make me do this today. And I just thank you and praise you, Lord. Anyway, when we were there, my brother and I have two other sisters, and one of them was unable to come because she was ill. They are my father's daughters. We were able to go. And when we were there, we met with many surprises and many joys. And I just want to tell you that was such an awesome time in my family's life. This is something that we will never forget. And we had family that came from all over the country just to be a part of this. So I praise God for that. That was so awesome. But the surprises were very, very pleasant surprises. First, when we got to Kentucky, of course we stayed with relatives, because that's all we have is relatives in Kentucky. We never know who is, who's a stranger, because every time we meet somebody, it's a relative. So I remember when we were younger, our cousins would, when we'd go, they would have parties, and my female cousins and I would be looking at the men and be like, And they'd say, forget it, that's a cousin. So you know how that can be. But anyway, when we first got there, and we were at one of my cousins' homes, they presented us with a newspaper. And we were very in awe because, to our surprise, guess who was in the newspaper? My dad. That was a surprise. Then when we got to the museum, and the museum is the American Saddlebred Museum, we were met with another very pleasant surprise. There was a big poster as soon as you get in the place that you see, and this was the poster, and guess what? My dad was on the poster. Talking about tears, even my brother shed some tears because we were just so thrilled. This on the bottom is also my uncle. And as I had said to you before, this was not just a celebration of my dad's life. It was a celebration of all the black horsemen who contributed to the Horsemen's Association. Once we got in, aside from all the exquisite exhibits that we saw, including the one from my dad, that my brother and I took pictures standing around because it was just so awesome. We met a young man, and I did know his father, but I didn't know him. And it was interesting that we didn't cross paths for some reason. Who had written a book, and the book is called The Forgotten Horseman, A Son's Weekend Memoir. This was a book about his ventures within the horse business and his experiences at the horse shows with his father. This is his father here, okay? And I remember his father. In fact, I read this book in one day. I was so excited about it. And it brought so many memories back of the times when I spent with my dad at the horse shows, watching all the things that went on. And I just, what can I say other than I am still on cloud 9. Now, in addition to all of the things in addition to this being a joyous occasion, I also want to share two things that I learned. There was a lot of history that I learned while I was there. Oh, and I forgot to mention that they had also created a documentary. It was a movie about the Forgotten Horseman. And of course, my dad was in that too. Yeah, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. He's also in this book. There's a picture of him and the son, and Lee, who is the author of the book. Both of them. Let's see, who just gave this to me? Pastor Kelly. Yeah, Pastor Kelly grabbed me. She says, "Can I read the book?" And of course you can. This is a picture. You may not be able to see it. And also, he does mention on several occasions my father and my uncles. And there were two uncles. One of them was by marriage, and the other was my dad's brother, who was also involved. We call him Uncle Butch. But anyway, two things that I wanted to tell you. And I think it's really important that we learn about this because brothers and sisters, if you don't know your history, then you're in trouble.
Come
I'm
on,
telling
come
you.
on, yes.
All right, you really are in trouble, and I really just want to stress that more and more. To show you how racism ran rampant. Of course, we already knew that, and it still does. But it ran rampant even in that segment of the population. In the history, in the documentary that I looked at about 4 or 5 times because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. And the emotions that I felt anger, I felt joy, I felt pride, I felt so many different emotions because of what I was seeing. But one of the things that I learned in that documentary was that the horsemen who worked and toiled so hard training these horses, spending hours working with them, and I remember that because I remember my dad spending hours, and I remember almost all the men that he talked about in that book. I remember them spending hours working, spending hours talking to each other, helping each other, even though they were actually competing against each other. But talking about a brotherhood, that was an unbelievable brotherhood. But anyway, I'm getting off the track. The men who trained these horses weren't even allowed to ride them in the shows. So a lot of times, their owners who were white did it. And the black men who actually trained them weren't even given the credit for it. Now, my dad was able to do it. I don't know how he did it, but he was able to ride from time to time. But if you know anything about me, you know how I got what I got from him, because he was something else. The other thing I want to mention, too, is to show you how crazy that racism was at that time. There was a horse that was trained by this gentleman here. His name was Tom Downing, the one that I mentioned. This book is about, basically. The horse was a champion, and it was deemed to be a champion by just about everybody who saw it. However, it was white. And because it was white, the judges decided that it wasn't good enough to be a champion. Isn't that ironic? However, the horsemen, to show you how smart they were, decided they were going to make a change. So they dyed the horse a chestnut brown, and they changed the name to Painted Doll. And the judges did not know. And wouldn't you know that the first day that they actually showed that horse, it won. And it won from that point on. So that just goes to show you some of the things that men had to deal with. Okay? And I've told you so many of them inventing things and not getting the credit. I mean, there were just so many things. But that was one thing I wanted to share with you because I thought it was really important. And it goes back to what I wanted to say before. If you have older brothers, sisters, if your parents are still living, if you have grandparents, if you know older people who are not necessarily relatives, but know some history, find out from them. Because God knows, if I had known some of the things that I learned just this couple of weekends ago, I probably would have written a book myself. But I thank Lee for doing it because he set a precedent here. And just find out about your ancestry. Don't celebrate. You know, we just celebrated Black History, everybody. Don't celebrate it just that month. Celebrate our ancestors, our relatives, our parents. Celebrate each other each and every day. Because sisters and brothers, we have a history.